Go for three. Okay, let's try that again. Good evening and welcome to the Wednesday, October 18th, 2017 public session meeting of the Halton District School Board. I'd like to welcome everyone, and I just recognize we have regrets from Superintendent Salmini, but everyone else is here in attendance tonight. I would like to ask that everybody who, if you haven't done so already, please mute or silence anything that may make noise. That would be appreciated. And to remind everyone, we are video voice recorded and we are live streamed out to the web, so you can wave at your friends at home. Could I have a motion? Nope, sorry. These extra lines on this new agenda, I still have to get used to. Okay. Halton, as we know it today, is rich in history and modern traditions of many First Nations and the Métis. From the Anishinaabe to the Anishinaabe, the Adirondack, and the Haudenosaunee, and the Métis. These lands surrounding the Great Lakes are steeped in Indigenous history. As we gather today on these treaty lands, we have the responsibility to honor and respect the four directions: land, waters, plants, animals, ancestors that walk before us, and all the wonderful elements of creation that exist. We would like to acknowledge and thank the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation for sharing their traditional territory with us. Thank you. Could I have a motion to approve the agenda? Trustee Gray? Well, I have to see. You need to put your mic. And actually, could you cue yourself as a speaker so then the camera will zoom into you? There you go. Okay, Trustee Pavan.
Thank you. I would like to put forward a motion to defer item 4.2.1 until November 15th.
So there's a motion to defer the student trustee policy. Trustee Metropolansky.
Thank you. So I'll just explain the rationale for that. We had a student senate meeting yesterday, and at that meeting we explained and discussed the student trustee election policy with the elementary and secondary senators. We had some really comprehensive discussions with the senators. They were extremely engaged and curious. They took up both of the meetings. The elementary students were overwhelmingly in support of the policy. The secondary students asked to informally vote on each of the major changes that we were making to the policy. All of the changes received a majority, in fact, a supermajority of the votes. That being said, there were some very interesting points and ideas raised in both of the meetings that we hadn't necessarily considered. And after hearing some of the ideas that were brought up, we think that we should give the senators some more time to ask questions, to talk to their peers, to come up with suggestions, to see what we could add to the policy to make sure that there's a better understanding of all of its points. So the suggestion that we motion to defer the vote to November 15th, the reason for that is the reason it's not the first is we would like to give them at least 2 weeks to email us with their questions and their ideas. So even though it does have broad-based student support now, we want to make sure that there's a clear understanding of the policy and that we're able to hear and incorporate all perspectives. If any of the trustees have any additions that they'd like to make or any changes or any thoughts that they have on the policy, please feel free to email us, and we will also take that into consideration in this time period that we would have before the next vote, if you guys vote to support this deferral.
Thank you. So what I'm going to do is we will continue with the approval of the agenda, and when we get to that item, we will note that there is a motion to defer, and we will vote on it at that time. Okay? So any other comments or questions about the approval of the agenda tonight? Seeing none? All those in favor? And that passes unanimously. Thank you. So we're now up to, is there any declarations of possible conflict of interest tonight on any of the items here on the agenda? Seeing none, we have no delegations. And our first presentation is item 2.3.1, the operational plan update. See page 33, report 17118 under information from Associate Director Bogue. Welcome, Associate Director Bogue.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Through you two trustees, it's my pleasure to provide an update on our operational plan from last year. Last year was our first year of our multi-year plan, and so this is our first update on progress made last year, and it would be our intent to bring this type of presentation to trustees each year for the next 3 years. Just to, for clarification, this presentation corresponds to report 17118. And just so trustees know as well, we're going to highlight some pieces out of the report. The report does provide an update on all targets within our multi-year plan or our operational plan in Appendix A. And Appendix B has the numerical progress, the data. We've called that sort of our data tracking tool. And again, it'll be our intent to bring those back each year, so you do get an update on the year's progress, but that data tracking tool will be there so you can track progress over the course of our multi-year plan as well. So today we want to share a few successes in a couple of areas where we struggled a little bit. One of the observations that we did have is we have some targets that we found are going to be quite lofty. In fact, one of them is unachievable, and we'll talk about that as part of the presentation today as well. We chose a target of a 10% increase, and we're already at 91%. So there's a bit of learning here for us as well, with some of the areas that are new for us. So our approach today will really be to sort of ping pong around the room. So the experts and the folks who have responsibilities for the specific areas will speak to them. We're going to try to keep this moving as quickly as possible, and then we'd be happy to answer questions as well when we're done. Does that sound like a plan? So overview, this is really, we're here to talk about successes and challenges, and again, specific to the multi-year plan. So we'll start with, and the slides are color-coded. If you remember, red was our our engagement and achievement. So they're color-coded to match the multi-year plan. We're going to start with students, and I think this one will be Julie.
As Superintendent Salmini, who is regretfully absent this evening. So the proportion of students achieving the provincial standard on the grade 3 EQAO reading assessment will increase by 5%. That is our goal. The target for 2020 is 84%. Over the course of the last year, we saw an increase from 79% to 82%, so we are definitely moving in the right direction. As next steps, there are staff learning opportunities that are continuing to support comprehensive literacy programs in all of our elementary classrooms, and a real focus on emergent literacy institutes that are focusing on building teacher knowledge and how to support those beginning readers and writers. And now as myself, as the secondary superintendent of program, our focus on engagement and achievement on the applied level courses, our hope is that by 2020, our final grades meeting the provincial standard, which is a 70%, not a pass, will increase by 5%. We set a target of 57.4%. We have seen an increase from a baseline of 52.4% to 53.6% over the course of the last year. We remain very committed to our applied strategy. That's a homegrown HDSB applied strategy that we keep expanding and going deeper with every year. And as well, we have also taken the provincial RMS strategy, which is only targeted to 9 of our schools and funded that way, but we have extrapolated that and we've expanded it and are including and working with all of our schools as part of that this year.
I'll speak to this one. This slide doesn't have a lot of detail except to say we've established baselines on these 3 goals. And if you recall, when we built the multi-year plan, we talked about student profile and both teachers and kids understanding themselves as learners. And we also talked about student well-being, and these, which is a big ministry focus for sure. These are 3 things that were very new to our current multi-year plan, and we didn't have existing measures. So we've done that through the Have Your Say survey, and so this is our progress. Really, we've now got a baseline measure, and we will use that to measure our growth in future years.
I'll speak to this slide, the focus on students with special needs. And for this goal, we are focused on the gap between the performance of students with special needs as opposed to what we'll call, quote unquote, our regular population. So that gap in performance as measured by EQAO varies across different grades and different subject areas of EQAO measurement. So when you think about the reduction by 25%, so for example, in the grade 6 reading, a 25% reduction from the 40% to the 36%, 25% of 40 is 10%, right? So we're trying to reduce that gap from 40 down to 30. If that makes sense? And if so, if with each of those gaps, we're trying to get a 25% reduction in the gap. So you can see we've just provided one sample of what that's looking like from last year. We've already have a 4% reduction in reading, 3 in math, 3 in writing and 1 in math in grade 6. So just one sample of where we're on the right track in trying to close that gap. And how we're doing that, we did our first year of a multi-year plan with a specific focus on improving our understanding of the profile of students with learning disabilities and improving our strategies and instruction for those students. So the first year went really well, and so we've expanded that into a multi-year plan to see continued improvement in closing that gap.
I'll speak to this one. This is an area of focus for us. The current data around school safety shows a bit of a decline. So we have our target set for 70 in elementary and 74. We experienced a slip from 65 to 61, so the gap is widened a bit, especially in elementary, just down 1 in secondary. I'll call this our implementation dip here. We do have a lot of things in place. We have well-being teams in every school, and they're looking at really targeted classroom interventions. We work a lot with our schools to move the well-being initiatives, we call it, from the hallways into the classrooms, so strategies that every teacher is doing rather than just a committee. So we really think this is deep, rich work. It will take some more time, but we are quite confident it will pay off in seeing these results trending upward over the next few years. And we are deepening programs like CPS, collaborative problem solving, and our restorative practices trainings as well. Huge appetite for schools to take these on, and the takeaway on these trainings is increased sense of well-being and safety in students. So we're anticipating some turnaround in the next few years.
This slide represents an area of the engagement survey that targeted system leaders in particular and asked them about their proficiency in 3 areas: performance management, progressive discipline, and equitable recruitment. And this may have been one of the lofty goals when we said we wanted to increase this by 10%, because we see that they already feel, 89% already feel that they're proficient in the area of performance management. This may be because we started training workshops in these 3 areas last year for all of our administrators and corporate leaders, and we will continue to offer them this year. And we have also revised them based on the exit passes that we received from last year's sessions, and they were very widely attended. So we are still working on this, but as I remarked, they're already fairly good numbers.
We've seen quite an increase in the collection of payments through our new online system. We're starting to see again an increase up to 39%, 39.2 from 36.4. Certainly the target of 90% we believe is achievable with again the implementation of our new cash online software. Just as additional information, the one issue was with respect to credit card payments, and as a result of the new system and the success that it has generated, we are increasing both our enrollment in the system and also the number of funds that are collected through credit cards.
This is my slide. This is a lofty goal, for sure, having 100% of staff being provided with learning opportunities in order to build awareness to sustain a culture of equity and inclusion. While lofty, we're very confident in meeting that goal, particularly given the progress that we made over the 2016-17 school year. There were a wide variety of capacity building sessions offered to an array of employee groups. A good example of that would be the blanket exercise, which was done with and offered to every employee group across the board. Beyond that, and beyond the other ones mentioned up there, we offered a number of different workshops, right from our most inexperienced employees through our new teacher induction program, particularly around Indigenous perspectives and ensuring that those are integrated into the learning and into the classrooms. Across all of our other employee groups, not just those who work directly with students, but those who work in support of students. Another example of that would be the EGAL training that we've offered to our child and youth counselors and social workers, amongst other groups, that really looks into issues of how best to support LGBTQ students, as well as really looking deeper at the issue of gender identity and how that plays out within our schools and our classrooms.
The Have Your Say survey was developed last year in response to some of the targets that were created by the group in this room around the multi-year plan. We previously did not have some of the measures to see what our progress was in terms of those goals. So last year was really a baseline setting year. We will be sharing infographic results with stakeholders, and they will be posted shortly. We know that last year it was the first year of administration. We are looking at increasing the number of participants in responding to the survey and looking at strategies to engage more stakeholders. One of the things that we're committed to for this year is to provide translation in the top 5 languages within our system of languages spoken at home. And we'll be working strategically with the Equity and Inclusive Education team to look at schools in which we can model some great practices in engaging families and bringing parents and community members into the school and engage in that survey.
The accessibility target in our multi-year plan is kind of premised on the provincial goal of having full compliance by 2025. So we've set our pace to bring us to that compliance date. So the current level of accessibility on a per square foot basis was about 63%, raised to 68%, in part due to the volume of work and dollars that were available through school renewal, the school condition, and of course the close gap. Enabled us to do a significant number of projects throughout. I would say the largest number of those were washroom renovations, but some of them were directed at accessibility directly.
There are a number of different types of partnerships in which the HDSB participates. There's sort of three broad groups. The first type are facilitated through the ministry's community planning and partnership guideline to assist boards in establishing more facility partnerships. Another type of partnerships is governed by Policy Memorandum 149, which pertains to regulated health professionals and social service professionals. And the board also has several partnerships with community organizations and charities that are mutually beneficial to both groups. And within this group there's a subgroup of industry partners. Some highlights: using Community Hubs funding, Woodview, already a partner, will be running a satellite office serving mental health supports for children and families in Halton Hills. That was negotiated last year. Under the community planning and partnerships, we entered into a facility use agreement with cadets. We signed a memorandum of understanding with UNICEF, and the region of Halton supported our new Ontario Early Years Centres and Family Centre at Oakwood Public School.
We are really excited to be collaborating together both with facilities, planning, IPLs, students, and program to model what we think would be a great new high school design. And a part of that thinking is meeting with the architects on a bi-weekly basis last year. And those plans obviously are still in flux. So we're looking forward to sharing that same process as we explore opportunities for other high schools and refreshing some of the ideas as we rebuild and refresh. We have been charged with the mandate to try to, with the big district that we have in Halton, to unify people so that they can have conversations beyond the meeting. So looking at outlets such as Google+, blogs, Twitter feeds, so that people can share some of their ideas, try, fail, learn, fail, learn, and try, fail, learn, and maybe victory will come. So there's a nice way of bridging that piece. And we've branded it on the shift so that people are contributing to those ideas there. We've also launched positive learning spaces with flexible furniture, particularly outdoor classrooms, as well as corridors and classroom walls. So how that might look different based on the learning needs of students, and exciting some deep innovative thinking, both on the corporate and academic side. So last year we ran a number of sessions for all facets of our organization and business model to incorporate thinking that might be done differently. And as of today, hot off the press, EduGains has published a series of 4 videos on HDSB in terms of leadership and creativity through Gord Truffin's ICT, as well as school programs in terms of how to inspire students with technology, learning, and leadership.
So that's, we've covered all the areas there. That's a sampling of some of the successes and a couple of areas that were our challenges for us for this year. It's our plan to be back in February, March to do an update on the work from this year, so you'll hear more then. And we'd be very happy to answer any questions about anything from the presentation or from the report, and we'll maybe farm those questions out to the appropriate superintendent.
Well, thank you very much, everyone, for your presentation. I mean, there's a lot of great information in here, and it shows that we've already started towards achieving our goals. Comments and questions, Trustee Collard.
Yes, through you. Thank you very much for the presentation. I find it a little bit difficult when I'm looking at the Appendix B, and I'm going to explain what my trouble is. If you look on the first page of Appendix B, on the first line, it says we will increase that level by 8%. So year end was 56%, and the target is 64% for 2019-2020. So what we've done is we've added 8% to 56% to get there.
But if you then go and look for the next page, where it says the gap in achievement will be narrowed by 25% for students with special education needs in all EQAO assessments, where what we've done is we've taken 25% of the current gap, which is 10%. We haven't done the math the same way in that case. What we've, instead of subtracting 25, what we're doing is subtracting 25%. And I remember when we first came out with these goals, I specifically asked if we were doing an increase based on adding 8%, subtracting 25%, and I was told, yes, we are. But it seems that throughout this report, we're doing it different ways depending on who's doing the calculation. And I understand why, but it's inconsistent, and the inconsistency makes me question, is it the targeting number that's in red that's incorrect, or is it the MYP targets in black that are, detailed? Are they the ones that are incorrect? Because we do have to make sure that we're consistent, and one of these things isn't like the other. So we have to make sure we're consistent on that. Furthermore, I would really appreciate a heat map so that we can see where we are at on these targets.
Thank you for that question, Trustee Caller. I'm going to provide a response, and then I'm going to look to my friend Superintendent Blackwell, who's the mathematician, if I get it wrong. We had lots of conversation about this last when we were developing these targets. The only inconsistency, I would say, the one where we've used that sort of percentage of the number is the gap closing one. I'll have to go back and check, because what we've done for most of them, it's the proportion of the whole. And remember, we debated that word about proportion. So the proportion of the whole is 10%, and so it's the raw number of 10. So from 56, if we're going to increase it by 10 or by 8, we add that to it. If it's a percentage of the gap, if the gap was 40, then it is the percentage of the gap. And I do understand that it's confusing if we're not consistent, but we did that intentionally. And I'll tell you why. When we were looking at the special education target, we talked about, why couldn't we just say we're going to reduce the gap, like pick a number? But because the gaps are different for each area, we didn't want to pick a number. It's dependent on how big. If the gap is this big and we reduce by 25%, that's going to be quite different than if the gap is only this big. So that was sort of the rationale. I do understand it's confusing. Is there anything else, Superintendent Blackwell, that we should add to clarify?
Mud. I think one of the other things we did talk about, when we talked about that goal, we thought that the gap could close because the all students could decrease, and there's a stagnation for students with special education needs. And, there's so many ifs and thens and what if. I think that's our job to look at very closely. Why is that gap closing? And is it closing because that upper level is coming down, or is it because both are improving, which we would want, and creating that gap? So we are creating a narrowing of that gap. So that's something that we have to do in terms of looking at that 10% in that first example and say, is that 10% that both were increasing and we close that gap? And that will be important for us to look at our strategies that got us there.
May I follow up, please?
Go ahead.
Because if you go down to operational plan, the accessibility of HDSB schools will increase by 15%, and we start with 63, so we should end with 78, but we're ending with 72%. So what we've done, we've taken 15% of 63. So we're not consistent on even on the increases, and that's where I'm concerned that we don't really know what our target is. It's either the explanation of how we're arriving at the target, or it's the red number that's wrong. And so it wasn't just on the first page, because there are ones that have been done the same way as the gap that aren't a gap. So it does need to be corrected, I would hope. Thanks.
I'll just acknowledge you're absolutely right on the accessibility one. So we'll have a look at that. I'll tell you one of the challenges we had originally, and trustees may recall, some of our targets didn't have this increase by such and such. It had the number, which was very clear. So we'll go back and have a look at that. Hopefully we'll, if required, we can make some adjustments to the right-hand column, which is the 1920 number. And then that might help add some clarity, but we'll go back and have a look. Thank you for that.
2020, not 1920.
It depends on what year, what century we're in. It's before where most of us are born. Trustee L. Harrison.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation. My question is with respect to the equity and inclusion statement that is included on all secondary course outlines. And it's a great statement. My question is, how does that translate as a real tool for teachers in the classroom? And what does that look like for a disengaged and struggling learner? How does that manifest itself in something real?
Through the chair to Trustee L. Harrison. So for the benefit of everyone who's here, the statement that was added to all of our secondary course outlines is all courses within HDSB are taught in learning environments that promote inclusive education and identify and eliminate discriminatory biases, systemic barriers, and power dynamics that limit the ability of students to participate, learn, grow, and succeed. All students see themselves reflected in the curriculum, their physical surroundings, and the broader environment so that they are engaged in and empowered by their learning experiences. And this was a joint initiative between the Equity Department and the Program Department. And the conversation behind that was that with all of the learning and in-servicing that we're doing for all of our staff and the work that we're doing with all of our students, we wanted to make explicit the goal that we have for every single one of our students and every single one of our teachers, so that it doesn't matter if one is teaching a social science that lends itself more easily to conversation about that, or whether or not we're talking about grade 12 physics, that this is the expectation for the course. And so it's started some very good conversation amongst the different department areas as well as to how you make this really explicit in an area that doesn't lend itself as easily to it. And so our teachers are now working within their various departments to try to bring this alive. It also ensures that students know what the expectation is about how they are being treated and how they should feel in any of our classrooms at any time.
So in summary, it provides a common rallying point for people.
Yes, most definitely. So it is defining what all classrooms should and look and feel like at all times, both for the staff and student.
Thank you. And seeing no further speakers, I'd like to thank everyone again for their input in the presentation. It gives us a good snapshot of where we're going and gives us an opportunity to see the progress that we will have come back to us in February. So thank you very much. All right, so we're now up to the receipt and approval of our consent agenda items. Could I have a motion to receive and approve? Trustee Daniele, seconded by Trustee Gravens. No, not unless someone makes a request for you to. Did you want to?
Well, in the consent agenda is, no, forget it, carry on. It's not part of the consent agenda. I'm wrong.
Vice Chair Gray.
Thank you. I do have a question on the capital update, so I'll ask that be.
So the capital update will be pulled out for discussion. Is there any other items? Seeing none.
Yeah, I can, actually, I'm right. I can speak to two. I need to speak to a couple, just.
So you want to pull to it? Pulled out. Okay, so we will also be pulling out the administrative procedure update and the board report update. Is that correct? Which one did you want? Which ones did you want?
Both.
Okay, both.
AP and board
Okay,
report.
so then we're pulling out 3: capital update, administrative procedure update, and the board report update. So now that those 3 have been pulled out, all those in favor of
I'll be super quick.
just a, okay. Trustee L. Harrison, oh, she got it. And that passes unanimously. Thank you. So now we'll deal with the items that were pulled out. First, the capital update. Vice Chair Graves, would you like to ask your question?
Thank you. It is with regards to Milton Southwest number 10 public school, and through you, Chair, to perhaps Superintendent Cullen. It's saying that the start date is October 2017, and we're the 18th, and I haven't received anything about a sod turning and whatnot. I was wondering if things were going to start happening within the next 12 days. Thank you.
Thank you for that. As you know, the board did approve and award the tenders at the previous meeting. All of that documentation has now been forwarded. You may recall that the report did have a conditional component to verify one of the funding aspects. That has all been verified. So the order has been placed with the general contractor. He's mobilizing as we speak. So I would say, yes, we should see some activity within the next 12 days. Whether we'll have the formal sod turning or not is a little bit more ceremonial than the actual start of work. As you know, there are some cases when we've done the sod turning just before the second floor goes up, but we'll try not to do that in this occasion. So,
well, or the case vote now, we still haven't had it. But okay.
Very true.
Vice Chair Grace.
Yes, I was more interested in the action than the formal part. So that's great to hear. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Miller, regarding the administrative procedure update and board report update, since you pulled them both out.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair Amos. I'll do administrative procedure first. I want to bring your attention to a change in the admin procedure around opening a new elementary school. We've changed the date, the start date for the principal, and I would like Superintendent Newton to speak to, so you understand the reasons why.
Yes, we would like the change in the administrative procedure to be January 1st. So we will be bringing a board report to you on November 16th. When we have finished the interview processes for our current advertisements and promotion pieces out there, we will also include the name of who we would like to name for the principal of the new school in January. The thinking of moving it to January, which is 37 days earlier than we've done in the past. We've usually released an elementary principal March 1st. The thinking is that would give the elementary principal some time to develop a vision, to develop open house thinking for staffing, and to get to know the community, to meet with the trustees of that area, and also to meet with facilities planning and some of our multi-year planning in terms of incorporating the ideas that we've been bringing them up to speed with our school programs people as well. So in that time, staffing goes down 2 weeks after March 1st. We felt that in the past, that's been a pretty rushed process, and four of your current superintendents have opened an elementary public school, and so they have said how that is a very rushed process when you're going to the market trying to staff your school within 2 weeks of developing a vision. So that is why, in fact, we've asked for the release to happen January 1st, as well as the release of a senior secretary that would then be released with the principal to do the work that is required in a more reasonable pace and bringing up to a speed in line with the vision of the board.
Thank you. And I believe there's a couple questions regarding your report now. Trustee Harvey Hope.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. I think this is a great idea, and I'm going to go at it from I know all of you have experience with opening new schools, but I'm going to go at it from the student point of view. Having your principal leave at the end of December and having a new one coming in January is a much better time to do it than having them come in on March 1st, which is just before March break and just after you've come back. So from a student's point of view, and having been in a neighborhood where they like to promote, I'll say poach, staff to do these new schools, and having lived through quite a few March 1st changes, I wholeheartedly support the January 1st date. It also gives the new principal and the old principal a breather in the winter break, a little bit of time to change your thought process from old to new, rather than just, February 28th and now you're March 1st, right? So.
Thank you, Trustee Gray.
Yes, thank you through the chair. I too would support this notion of January the 1st. It's the notion of opening up a new school is highly complex. It's important to build the community and the vision. And most importantly, I think it's just crucial that that whole process is thought out well and is not rushed. And so to give that administrator and with the secretarial help to have that time, that little bit of extra time, I think it's will be well worth it and will pay wonderful dividends for the school and for the community.
Is that the voice of experience? Director Miller.
Thank you, Chair Amos. Just on the board reports, there's going to be 3 changes, or they will likely come later. The special education review scheduled for November 1st and the Close the Gap update for November 1st are likely to be later on in the month. And the Indigenous flags will be likely later than November 15th, as Superintendent Etoff, as the group has not met yet, so he hasn't been able to meet with that group. So just to bring the...
Sorry, Director Miller, just as a point of clarification, we have brought an initial a conversation to the Indigenous Advisory Council, but we haven't had an opportunity to bring back our draft recommendations. So we would like their voice and input on that.
Thank you very much. And seeing no further comments or questions, we will move along to is there any items for approval from private session?
There are no items requiring ratification in public session.
Thank you very much. All right, so we're now at the action items for October the 18th, and the first item is the student trustee report, which we already have a motion of deferral. So I would like a seconder for the motion to defer the student trustee policy till the November 2nd board meeting. Trustee Daniele. Is there any further discussion? You heard the rationale from Trustee Metropolitansky earlier. Is there any other discussion regarding the deferral? Seeing none?
My web search turned something up for. Is there any further discussion? Heard the rationale for trust earlier. Is there a
I'm not sure why Siri's even working. She does. I don't want to ask her what it was, though. And I'm on mute, so that's interesting.
Siri get the vote now?
Okay, I've turned her off for the moment. Let's see if she pops back in. But anyways, all those in favor, all those in favor for deferring this policy till our next board meeting? Oh, the 15th, not the 2nd? Okay. Or the 1st? Okay, well, sometime in November. Sorry, to November the 15th. All those in favor? And that passes unanimously, so we'll look forward to coming back on the 15th with full consultation from the Student Senate. All right, the next item for approval tonight is the identification of community planning and partnerships opportunities, report 17108, General Manager Renzella, Superintendent Bierman, on page 24 of your board package. Welcome back, Manager Renzella.
For you this evening is a report identifying community planning partnerships opportunities that we will be presenting at the November 8th public meeting as required by our policy. I just wanted to, I'm not going to go through the report. It was presented 2 weeks ago. Just wanted to bring to your attention the fact that we do have a number of community partnerships already in the board. It's identified in Appendix 3. I know there was an amended version from the last time, and thank you, Trustee Grubens, for bringing that to our attention. So we do have a number of community planning partnerships, and also wanted to bring to your attention, I think Superintendent Podberg wanted to identify that in all of our elementary schools, with the exception of our middle schools, we have before and after school programs. So really engaging the community as part of our, in terms of partnerships out there. So. And I also want to point out that, subject to the notification of the November 8th public meeting, and we've already received inquiries from some community groups about meeting to talk about some opportunities in both existing facilities and some new co-builds potentially. So that is, it's encouraging to see that. We'll see what the discussions are, once they realize they have to pay for their portion. But again, we're trying to engage the community as much as possible. I'd be glad to answer any other questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Comments or questions regarding the community partnerships? Trustee Collard.
Thank you very much. I appreciate this report. There is some fear and trepidation in the city of Burlington when they see the name of a school on this list because of the PAR that happened last year. And I would just like some commentary regarding the likelihood of a school that is experiencing unused space for community partnerships subsequently appearing on a list for a possible PAR. And I'm looking for perhaps the director to comment on that so that we can alleviate some community concerns that these schools are slated for eventual PAR consideration.
I have to apologize, Trustee Collard. I was being asked the question and I didn't hear you.
So there's some fear in South Burlington, having just gone through a PAR, that schools appearing on this list may eventually also appear on a PAR. And I was asking for you to clarify that that is not the intention of the community partnerships list, and perhaps give some detail about the LTAP community partnerships and the PAR process and how they work.
And I'll look to General Manager Ranzella to jump in as well. Sorry about that. Through you, Chair Amos, to Trustee Collard. Yeah, there are no guarantees, but it is certainly not the intent. The intention here is when we get partners, is when we have space in schools that's not occupied by students. And we will provide space to those partners. Often the partners will not they will not be enhancing the program in the school. They will not be contributing to the achievement of the students in the school. They'll just be partners, and we're essentially partnering with space for them. In some cases they are, like the before and after school programs. There's no question there's an advantage, and that's beneficial for our students. And some of the other ones may be beneficial to our students, but they may not be. If you look at one of the examples here, Blakelock is Air Cadets. That's in the evening. We provide space for them, but those students could come from the Catholic board, they could come from the private board, they could come from our board, they could come from Blakelock, they could come from all over. So with the PAR process, when we undertake a PAR that has been identified in the LTAP, it's based on available pupil places. The partnerships do not negate those available pupil places. So if it hits that threshold, if it hits the threshold as identified in our PAR policy, the 65% and so on, then it's not that, how do I word this? It's not as significant if the partner is in there, because the partner will not replace those empty pupil places. Am I correct in that, General Manager Renzella?
Can I just kind of add on to that? Generally speaking, as part of any partnership, if there's a utilization of classrooms or space that the board has, it reduces the on-the-ground capacity. So, for instance, you may have a school that has 60% or whatever, and we're able to, in some cases, find a partner to utilize 4 rooms. Well, those 4 rooms would come off our OTG and they would be utilized. But at the same time, as you know, there's other factors that would come into play with respect to, the criteria in terms of determining whether or not a PAR will take place. But again, that's all moot at this point, given the fact that the ministry is looking at revising both their program and or their pupil accommodation review guidelines and their community planning and partnerships guidelines. And so at this point, there's nothing immediate with respect to that. So we're still some time away before, and then we as a board will have to come back and make any revisions to our policies with respect to those new guidelines. So we're a few years away before even thinking or considering that.
And the province is in the process of gathering input into both of those, the PAR process and the community partnerships. So,
thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Trustee Gerbens.
Thank you, Chair Amos, through you. I have had inquiries from the public with regards to Aldershot Elementary, how it's on the list, and the fear that if we have a magnet program going in at the school, that students will end up in portables. And I was just wondering if someone could speak to that.
Well, as identified, it's the elementary section of Aldershot that has 9 empty classrooms. There is some residual space available in the high school portion. Can't recall how many, 50 pupil places? 88. So notwithstanding, the concern that this magnet program is going to, how would you say it, attract multitudes of students, we do have the opportunity, as we mentioned during our part, to potentially use some of the space that's in the elementary section. We have not, at this point in time, over the last year, received any inquiries about Aldershot in terms of the elementary section. And, to utilize 9 rooms, that's a significant community partner, and I just don't see that at this point in time. But in the end, we as a board will determine the timelines, the requirements of any community partner. And if there is one interested in Aldershot, we will take that into consideration.
And through you, Chair Amos, to Trustee Gerbens. And we would not have a partner displace students, is basically it. So if they were to take more space and we had more students, we would have to reevaluate our partnership.
Thank you. Trustee Pappen.
Thank you. Through the chair, I think you may have answered my question. I noticed that 2 of the schools in Ward 4, Ryerson and Tecumseh, are both on this list. And we do have a school in Ward 4 that's over capacity at this point. And I know we've had concern from parents about, how we're going to resolve this. And at the time that the PAR was running, we were under the impression that nothing would be done until after the PAR is settled. So I guess I'm concerned about the impact of community partners on a possible boundary review in the south part of Ward 4.
Through you, Chair Amos, to Trustee Pappen. It's a good question. At this point, those 2 schools have reached that point that would allow us to engage with partners. And we haven't done a boundary review, so we have to put them on the list so that a partner could look at it. But certainly, as I just said around Aldershot, it's our call. And if we were to conduct a boundary review and move students in there, then we would not have partners displace students. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Trustee Gray.
Yes, thank you through the chair. In our most recent discussions, I remember through the PAR, there were some discussion around the notion of how well publicized were we about the community planning and partnership meeting. And I note that on the last page, page 27 of the board package, that there is an indication that notice of this meeting will be circulated to all identified community partners, and it will be posted in local newspapers and the board website. I'm wondering if there's any other vehicle by which we could spread this information, because I think community partnerships are a positive add to our schools, and I'm just wondering, is there any other medium through which we could reach out to potential community partners to ensure that no one is missing our notice?
Superintendent Etoff?
My apologies. My colleague was speaking to me at the same time. I'm sorry. Could you just repeat the last part? Thank you.
Certainly. Just the question is, what is it, are we doing anything more than just posting in the local newspapers and the board website? Is there something more that we can be doing to generate interest and awareness of this fabulous opportunity for members of our community? This question is born out of the experience we had last spring in the PAR, where there was a question of whether or not the community members were well enough aware that opportunities existed, and can we in fact generate more? And I'm just wondering what the plan is for that.
I'd say there's two significant pieces around furthering our reach. One is through technology and making use of various different platforms. We just recently began exploring and using ads on Twitter and social media, which isn't something that we have done in the past. And we have a significant number of followers at the moment, and of course those who follow them. And so that has had some significant success. One example is the Aldershot a survey in terms of acquiring ideas around alternate programming, and we've had significant responses, we think in part due to that approach. The second approach is a piece that a recommendation that has come back, initial recommendation from the marketing branding group that we're working with, in terms of untapped human resources and partnerships that we have with other groups across the communities. So our friends at Halton Region, our friends in various different associations that while we have relationships with, we don't often bring them in. And so we're going to be making a point of getting a core group together and bringing them in to meet with us at least biannually to look at how we can better work together for us to further in partnership on a number of different initiatives, and for us to broaden our reach and get information into the hands of those who may not necessarily have students within our system at the present time.
Just to follow up, a secondary question to that would be, have we ever considered examining the partnerships that exist in the boards of education around our area, around our regions, on either side, to the east, to the west, to the north, to see if we can learn anything from the partnerships that they've been able to establish, and perhaps that would give us an idea of maybe those that we could reach to in the future.
Interesting that you've raised that point, because it was a topic of conversation with our Ontario Association of School Business Officials last Friday, talking about CPP and meetings and whatnot. And generally speaking, they're running into the same issue as we are, is that they're hearing crickets as part of the process. So, but notwithstanding that, just to kind of add on to your previous question to Superintendent Etoff, we informed 64 different groups and agencies of the community planning partnerships. And in fact, and a lot of times things may happen organically where they get the information and then they kind of distribute it. Well, the town of Halton Hills may know a community group that's interested. So, and our kids network may pass something on to us in terms of an interest. So they may tell two friends and so forth, and we'll kind of increase that. But that's, we do try to actively pursue whatever partners. We have community development Halton on our list. There's a good connection in terms of trying to advocate and collect potential interest in our partnerships. So we're out there. As I said, we're trying to do the best we can, but to try to, as I said, discussing it with other community boards around us, they're not hearing significant feedback. It's just from that process, they may be getting it through other means.
Director Miller.
Through you, Chair Amos, I also think it's important to note that although this meeting is for February 8th and we've reached out to people, or November the 8th, I should say, not February the 8th. I'm jumping ahead there. This is not the only time that we seek partnerships. They can come at any time of the year. And we do meet with people. General Manager Renzella and I and a couple of trustees around the board attended a meeting, I think it was around last December, with potential partners. Many of those expressed interest at that time, but when we followed up, the interest had waned. That might sound pejorative. I don't mean it that way, but for whatever reason, they were not pursued from their end. So we do take other opportunities, and we do, if we hear of an organization or a group that wants to partner with us, we pursue it at any time of the year. It's not just on the November 8th meeting.
Thank you, Trustee Reynolds.
Thank you, through the chair. I'd like to build on the comment that Trustee Graves has raised about awareness. I appreciate this report, and in the report, the recommendation identifies that we're approving the list of schools for community partnerships, but that we're going to notify our community partners. And we've heard here that there's approximately 64 groups on that list. I'm wondering, in an effort of transparency, as well as to find out who is not on that list that should be notified, if we could have that part of this report, because I think it lets us know about who's out there. It makes them accountable to see that they too have a part to play in this conversation.
Those partners are listed in Appendix 1 of the board policy. And we continue to update it as we get more interest, or if we're meeting anybody, we've included it on the list. So they're there. And these people are also informed as part of our long-term accommodation plan. So they're also informed about our plans and whatnot. So it's not necessarily empty space, but also opportunities for co-builds or other partnerships with our schools.
Follow up, please.
Go ahead.
Sorry, what I meant was the actual list of the potential partners that you've invited to participate in this conversation. Is the link to this? Oh, no, it's not in my package. So I wondered, is there a link to this? Sorry? Yes.
Can't hear you guys. So the link is part of the policy and procedure, right? Is that not correct? Which is on the board website. Trustee Harvey Hope.
Thank you. Through Madam Chair, I'm going to follow on the same trail. So what I think perhaps, and correct me if I'm wrong, Trustee Reynolds, but I was thinking that what she was saying is that this particular report, it would have been nice if that appendix was attached to this report so that it would pull it into a different realm, and it wouldn't be somebody going and looking and say, oh, did I get that? It also, somebody else reading it would say, oh, that group got this notification. Why haven't I heard it from that channel? And so it would just give us one more way of saying, at this point in time, when this report was issued now for the invitation for November the 8th, this list of people have been sent in. So it's like putting a CC on a letter. It's just in the report. I think that was what was being asked. which makes some sense. And also because a lot of people really don't understand this, like the awareness of it. They say, oh, well, why couldn't we have done whatever? And we're like, well, we had the same problem in Ward 3. We had years where we had some spaces and nobody comes forward until they say, oh, well, I could have used that for, and you're like, but then why didn't you ask?
Can I comment? There's lots of I would have, and I'm interested, but when we inform them that they still have to pay rent, quite often they drop off, and for good reasons. Sometimes they can't afford it, or they've got a cheaper location, or whatever the case may be, or a more a closer location for their. But I would say this is still early days for this. I mean, it's only been the last couple of years. I think Superintendent Veerman and Cullen and I went to a meeting about, I think probably 2 years ago, when this was introduced, this whole notion of the CPP. So it's still, it's not part of the landscape of the community as much as we'd like it, because I would echo what General Manager Renzella said about when they spoke about it, business leaders. We spoke about it at directors' meetings as well, and the directors are all having the same experiences as us. They're not getting partners queuing up to get into their schools, and lots of their schools are so.
Thank you. And seeing no further speakers, I'm putting the recommendation on the table. Be it resolved, the Halton District School Board approve the list of schools for community partnerships, and that staff be directed to notify community partners of opportunities for sharing of space and undertake the annual community planning and partnerships meeting. Moved by Trustee Gerbentz, seconded by Trustee Pappen. All those in favor? And that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. So the community meeting will be on November the 8th, part of the committee of the whole meeting. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Renzella. All right, so moving on, we're now up to one of our highlights, the student trustee reports. Trustees Metropolansky and Mansour.
Thank you, Chair Amos. So I just want to start off by giving you guys an update about the drug policy working group that we have been working on for a bit, and also the student representatives for board committees. Starting off with the drug policy working group, throughout last year, students repeatedly raised the concern that there is a rising issue surrounding the use and abuse of drugs in our Halton community. So they asked us what is there that we can do. Dasha and I worked along with Superintendent Padrabarik to put together the drug policy working group, which consists of a public health nurse from the Halton region, 2 police officers, a manager from Halton Adapt, and several student representatives. I am the chair of the working group. I would also like to thank Trustee L. Harrison for taking on her role as the trustee representative on our committee. So our first meeting was yesterday, and our discussion mainly revolved around issue identification. From now until our next meeting, members have said that they will be coming back to us with statistics. One of the police officers told us that he will be able to get us statistics regarding the number of arrests of school-aged children which pertain to drug use. These statistics will all be anonymous, so they will be able to be shared if necessary. We do understand this is a very, very broad issue, so we, for the next several meetings, we will still continue to work towards issue identification, but we do feel that this is a very strong step towards working towards addressing a growing concern in our community. And then just talking about the student representatives on board committees. At this point, we have selected those student representatives for the board committees, and we will be talking to the committee leads regarding who those students are. And that's that for me. Thank you.
The last thing I'd add is about, quickly, we mentioned before that we had our second student senate meeting last night. Most of the meeting essentially for both elementary and secondary was talking about the student trustee election policy. I'm happy to say that we had an incredibly large turnout for the elementary senators. We have only one secondary school that does not have Senate representation, and it's Acton, but they're so far away, so it's so difficult, but we're still trying to see if there's something that we could do about that. But this is still, we're so happy that we have such a large turnout, and I know that we sent out the list to trustees of the schools in your wards and the ones that haven't sent in names of student representatives, and we've been trying to update that, but we would really appreciate if you could continue to reach out to those schools if you haven't already. It's never too late to try and get a Senate representative. Like, there have been a number of schools who have sent in representatives and they haven't done that for a number of years. So just seeing those kids come, even if it's the third meeting, the fourth meeting, as soon as they possibly can, I think is a great opportunity for those students. There were some specific concerns that were brought up by students, but we'll address those with trustees or superintendents as necessary. After this meeting, since this last one was about the student trustee election policy, we'll proceed with talking about more issue-based things with the student senators. So we'll report on that hopefully the next few board meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Danielle, you have to put yourself back on. Thank you. Any comments or questions for the student trustees tonight? Trustee Danielle?
I would really like to say how impressed I was with last night, especially with the turnout, and given that you had so many new students, if you could send us that updated list as soon as possible so we can talk to our schools about it. A few of the things that did really impress me was one of the requests from the students was to begin every student senate meeting with the acknowledgement of the territorial lands, and I was really, really impressed with that. And I counted, you had, I think, 43 elementary students, which was just phenomenal, the filling in the room. My question is, because I know I have it here, I'm sorry. Your next student senate meeting, will you be, I know you have sent the student senators the link to the policy and the invitation to speak to you. And I was in the room last night, and there were a few things that there was a great deal of concern about. And I'm wondering if you will have another face-to-face with them, or it will be all done one-on-one, because that's a very different dynamic than when you're talking as a group than as one of them approaches you and another one approaches you, because several of the senators approached me last night afterwards. So that's one of my concerns is, will you be facilitating another meeting with something that is that important?
Yes, absolutely. I think that the 2-week window where they can email us their concerns is necessary, because we don't just want to say for a month until the next student senate meeting, like, we won't be here to talk to you if you have any questions. Your only chance to do it would be the meeting before the board meeting. So we think that a lot of the questions that we heard were questions about how it works, or something that they might want to talk to us about, and that we could find an understanding with those students. But yes, we will absolutely have a face-to-face discussion with them at the meeting on the 14th.
I'm very glad to hear that, because it was particularly with the secondary students, there are portions in that policy that some of them vehemently disagree with. It's not a working it out, they vehemently disagree. So I'm curious to see how that's going to go. It was really, really interesting, though, because just even listening to that discussion, the engagement that they had on that was absolutely phenomenal, listening to them, and quite a difference from the elementary students, because I noticed a lot of their questions were about code of conduct and impeachment, so I'd be a little concerned about that if I were you. I think they've been watching a little too much U.S. television. But again, it was just for the rest of the trustees to know, both sessions went well over time, because there was so much engagement and so much discussion of that student trustee election policy. It was absolutely amazing to see. So congratulations on that, on getting, they may not be agreeing with you, but you've got them talking, and trust me, that's something significant.
So yeah, I would say to that, I completely agree. I think I'd stress that for the secondary one, we did do the vote, and while there is some opposing perspectives, it was a minority, and I know that in a democracy we can't have 100% agreement, but that being said, this is also why we're extending and giving them more time so that we can see how we can bring all of these perspectives in. Some of the most vehement areas of disagreement were about, for example, the equal weighting of the votes, and about whether or not the elementary students should have the equal weighting of their vote, whether or not their vote should be considered equal to a secondary one. So we could see why there could be a discrepancy and why some secondary students might feel very strongly about that. That was the most controversial point, but it's something that we can discuss, and we will be discussing at the next meeting.
Go ahead.
I still had 46 seconds, by the way. And I would agree with you. And then you got to a second place. You went to a second vote and changed that around because that first vote was not a majority in any way, shape, or form. But the biggest piece, and again, I had several student senators come up to me afterwards, and I've had them several email me as well, is the piece around restricting the number of candidates for the election. So that is something for myself. I'm not sure how comfortable I am with it when it comes to voting for the table. So I'm very curious to see how the discussion around that one's going to go.
Are there any other comments or questions for our student trustees tonight? Well, sounds like there's, you definitely got them engaged, and that's great to have that kind of conversation, and it sounds like you've got your work cut out for you. So thank you very much. All right, so we are now up to action items for November 1st. Apparently we have no action items for November the 1st at this moment. So we're into our information items. For tonight, October the 18th. Our first one is the staffing update, report 17114, Executive Officer McFadden. Welcome, Executive Officer McFadden, when you're ready.
Thank you. Through the chair. This is an annual report around staffing processes that took place for September 1st and around school reorganization. I gave a verbal report on many of the items listed here at the September board meeting, but I'd like to highlight just a couple in the report for you, and that is that the secondary annual placement process, we placed 180 LTO sections, or 30 LTO teachers through that process, and 68 positions were filled from the LTO list. This elementary placement process, we placed 69 permanent English teachers and 22 permanent French teachers. So those are new hires. So that's quite significant when you consider that many boards in the area are not hiring permanent teachers. That's quite an incredible hiring process that took place, and 132 English LTO positions and 11 French LTOs. So it's a great deal of hiring that we do in this board in September each year. We then have to, of course, replenish our occasional teacher lists because they become depleted through these processes, and we're currently doing that. We just received 800 plus applicants for the secondary occasional teacher list, and we've shortlisted that to over 400, and we're interviewing those as we speak. Principals are interviewing in teams in their schools, facilitated by the HR department. And then we'll be opening our elementary occasional teacher list as well. So through the next couple of months, we think that we will add over 700 occasional teachers to the Halton District School Board. And so that's a great deal of work for the HR department, and I'd like to applaud their efforts thus far because we have many of them working overtime, and also the contribution of our principals cannot be overlooked. They are hiring on all of these teams, and then on top of that, they're hiring for ECEs and EAs. AC recently approved the use of some retirees to supplement the great work being done by our permanent principals when I said we're getting a bit of interview fatigue happening from our administrators. But kudos to them because they do each year pitch in to do an enormous amount of interviewing. I'm happy to answer any other questions regarding the report.
Thank you very much for your report. Are there any comments or questions for Executive Officer McFadden regarding the staffing update tonight? Trustee Gray.
Thank you very much, through the chair. I wanted to make a comment just on the speed with which teachers were placed in September, meaning that we had classes that were with a teacher that would then be the teacher of record for the rest of the semester, or in case possibly for the year. I thought that was an amazing speed with which we've been able to get these teachers placed. So kudos again to your department and to all the other individuals who work so hard to make sure that this happens, because it always is a very large concern of the parents in our communities when we start with an LTO and then have to switch off into the person that is hired to take that position. So again, nothing but heartfelt thanks to everyone and great compliments to everyone as well. My question goes a little bit beyond this report, perhaps, and that is with the concerns that we have had in the past, and I have not had any concerns yet this year passed my way, but the concerns in the past around EAs, and are we healthy with our EA hiring list this year?
Thank you. It's almost as though you're privy to what's going on in the HR department, because this is an area that we're turning to our attention to very deeply. And school operations has also identified this as a major issue for the system, and that is our ability to have EAs replacements there when a permanent EA is off sick. And we have partnered with our EA union to survey all 800 of our supply EAs. Not 800, don't quote me on that number, but all of our supply EAs were provided with a survey so that we can find out the choice patterns how they accept jobs, because there are a number who don't accept jobs in certain areas, and we wanted to know what some of those patterns look like. So we're now analyzing that information, and what we hope to do with it is develop best practices that we can share with all of our schools. So if there are schools that EAs identify as being schools of choice, that we can spread some of that information throughout the system so that we can increase the number of EAs who accept jobs every day. We've also are doing a hiring blitz. We now have 200 shortlisted applicants to interview for EAs. As of this week, we had interviewed over 100, and we had over 30 ready to take our pre-employment testing, because there are physical tests that EA supplies have to take before we finalize their offers for position. So the short answer is that we are working on that issue. We knew that they had fill rate difficulties last year, and we're turning our attention and again partnering with our EA union on this issue, because they are aware as well that it is an issue for the board.
Thank you, Trustee Harvey-Hope.
Through you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much for this report. It has lots of really good information in it. I was curious, the bottom of page 31, it talks about on September 6th, we had 2024 elementary classes. And I know we do reorgs on September 25th every year. And I was curious, because I've never seen that. Well, I don't think I've seen the number of 2,000 classes. So just so I could update the number in my head now, do we know how many we reorged into so that we have a new number?
I believe, I can find out for sure, but I believe if you look at the next page on September 6th, the reorg resulted in a total of 10 classes being removed from schools. So that would be the answer.
We now think we're down to
2014. I can check that for you if you'd like.
Okay, and then the other...
Is this a follow-up?
Yes. Well, no, it's another question.
And if you could go back on the list, thank you. Trustee Pappen.
Thank you. Through Madam Chair to Executive Officer McFadden, I'd also like to thank you very much for this report. My question has to do with the implementation of the program viability and where we stand on our hiring of French teachers, and are we in a comfortable position moving forward?
Again, partnering with our ETFO union, last year we signed a joint agreement around how French teachers would be staffed for this September, because this year was a bit of a blip. We required fewer French teachers this year, but with the expansion of the French immersion, what's the number I'm looking for? Yes, intensity, thank you. We will require more perhaps next year. So we have made a reciprocal agreement where French teachers who were pulled from French and went into English will, it won't be voluntary. If they're still within their 5 years that they have to teach French for the board, they will go back into French. So that will provide us with a cushion of French teachers. And we've also, the report identifies that in 16-17 we hired 60, no, I'm looking at the wrong number here. It doesn't identify somewhere in this report the number of French teachers that we hired. 22? Yes. So French teachers are difficult because there's a great deal of competition for them province-wide, but we've developed some interesting software through our supervisor of recruitment where we can do Skype interviews in French with our French principals. And it's more than just Skype. It allows us to ask questions online. It's an online interviewing tool, and we found that helped us to secure French teachers without having to travel to faculties that were graduating French candidates. So we concentrate very strongly on hiring of French teachers, and we have been able to meet our needs in the past. So we're hopeful that we will be able to do so again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Harvey-Hope.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. I also wanted to highlight that there's an awful lot of work at the secondary level because I have noticed even in my high school, but also seeing some of the LTO ads going up, how much activity there has been on filling sections. I always knew that we added a few teachers, but for one high school to be having, this long list of new teachers between the first and second school council meeting, and also seeing all the LTO ads that are for secondary, it was just amazing to me. So I wondered if that's normal or whether there's some unusualness happening.
I think, and this is purely anecdotal, that we have received this year, we have more medicals coming in later, which result in the hiring stretching into the beginning of the school year. Normally we would try to have people give their medical certificates in the summer so that we could back that hiring up and have that people there for the first day. But you'll notice on the page 2 of the report, I believe there were 130 well, I can't find the number, but there were a number of unfilled LTO sections remaining in secondary on the first day of school, and that's something we try very hard to avoid. But I would say that that was due mostly to late medicals. I would also say that our permanent hiring was up in secondary this year. We had more retirements than we normally do in June, resulting in permanent hires, which then backfills into elementary LTO and STO hires. So yeah, we did have more turnover this year than we normally do.
Thank you. And seeing no further speakers, thank you very much for the staffing update. Sounds like we're actually doing pretty well. Thank you, Executive Officer McFadden. The next item is the operational plan update, but we actually had the presentation earlier, so we'll skip right by that. And we're now up to notices of motion. Are there any notices of motion tonight? Seeing none, up to the director's report. Director Miller.
Thank you, Chair Amos. I have 4 items in a director's report tonight. And one, you've seen the newspaper articles and so on. There is a report coming to the next board meeting around lead in the water, but we thought it'd be good for trustees to hear what the process is when there is a negative result or unsatisfactory result or a not acceptable level result. So I'm going to ask Superintendent Cullen just to talk about the process that happens if that is found.
Thank you, Mr. Director. Some of the concerns that we've had raised were related to the potential of students being exposed to drinking water when it may contain lead. And I think the protocol that the province of Ontario has in place is probably one of the most strict that we've seen. It seems to work very well. And our protocol is in any circumstance where there's been an adverse response or test result, the drinking source is either isolated, and by that, typically it's either bagged or taped off so that nobody can access it. In some cases, fixtures have actually been removed. One of the new components to the regulation effective this summer is not only to test the end of run, in other words, each branch of your piping distribution system. It's literally to test each point at which somebody could take a drink of water or fill a bottle. That has resulted in about 1,200 locations that actually have to be tested as opposed to our prior 120-ish on an annual basis. So that has resulted in a lot more results, i.e. volume. In some of those cases, we've actually removed the fixture. If it's in part of a building where it's not really useful or expected that students would use it as a drinking supply source, in some cases they've been eliminated or altered in such a fashion as they would not be suitable for the water fill stations or for drinking. And in most of the cases, it really resorts back to the flushing. So the protocol results in extending the flushing time until such time as you can verify that the daily flushing for whatever period of time is adequate to flush any potential lead out of the system. So all of the remedies have been put in place, I suspect, would clearly indicate that any of the water, when available in the schools, is suitable for drinking in that regard. And in some cases, we provided bottled water or water dispensers if for some reason the supply had to be temporarily postponed or curtailed at the school. Happy to take any questions related to that if that's appropriate.
Thank you very much. Are there any comments or questions to Superintendent Cullen regarding this? I know a number of us did get approached by parents with some concerns, and that Superintendent Cullen and Manager Denton helped us through the process to make sure we provided the parents with enough information. Trustee Harvey Hope.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, to Superintendent Cullen. I'm not sure exactly what the report is on November 1st, whether it's just the annual report or whether it's a special one, but wondering whether or not you could elaborate on, once there is an abnormal test or a test that goes beyond the limits, the procedure for retesting in such a way that some of the schools end up looking like they have more tests than just once a year. And I wonder if you could just elaborate on why some of them would have 4 or 5 or 6 tests.
Certainly. And in response to your first question, the November 1st report is the annual report. So as you know, for the 7 years of the existence of the regulation, we have brought a report in, the October-November timeframe to inform both the trustees and the public about the results of all of that testing. All of our results have been posted publicly in that regard since the beginning, and that's the November 1st report. And as I said earlier, the difference is this year it'll have roughly 1,200 individual results as opposed to the 120 of previous years. So we may create simply a link to that rather than put 34 pages in the board report. Gail thanked me for that. In answer to your question about what happens in an adverse, when an adverse result is found, and there's a number of reasons why, I should probably comment on that. There's a number of reasons it could happen. It could be in the water when it enters the building. It could be part of the piping system in the building. It could, in fact, be an error in the testing and analysis. Regardless of how it happens, when it happens, the reaction is to isolate it and not have anybody have access to it for that purpose. Then to be able to put it back online, you have to have 2 subsequent clear results in the flushed mode. And flushed meaning simply you turn on the tap, run it for a specified amount of time, draw another sample, have it tested, and then within another 24 or 48 hour period, you do the same. So what happens in some cases is we may flush it for 5 minutes, get it tested, find that it's still present in some level. So then we'll increase the flushing time to 7 minutes, retest, increase the flushing time to 10 minutes, retest. So that's why you may find multiple tests of an individual location, because the times get increased incrementally until you reach the point where you know that that volume or that time of flushing is sufficient to bring the readings down to the acceptable level.
Go ahead.
So also, again, some of these can be wrapped into the next board meeting's report. But so the idea that some of the community have said is, so why don't you just fix it? But in certain schools, in certain places, flushing is done every morning and is sufficient to have a safe environment. So is there a way to somehow incorporate that particular, once you know that 7 minutes flushing every day is going to be fine, then the school just flushes every day for 7 minutes, right? They don't, and then at some point it might be put on the list. It's almost impossible to dig up all the lead in some of these schools, right?
The case in point where if there's an adverse reading, that flushing then has to continue for 2 years. So that's maintained at that level regardless of what the suspected source may be. When you made your comment about just fix it, there's a number of fixes, but in some cases, the source is unknown. We've had schools that are brand new, guaranteed to have no lead anywhere in the infrastructure of the building. So the piping distribution system is not lead. The solder used to create the joints is not lead. There is no lead. We've had brand new schools test for lead and show lead in the water. So fixing is not always the same thing. So there's a number of different things that happen in each of those occurrences.
Thank you. Seeing no further speakers on this topic, Director Miller.
Thank you. Just 3 more items, all fairly quick. Superintendent Newton's just going to talk about the latest developments in shifts since creativity is a major part of our multi-year plan.
Great. Thank you. In August, we talked about building a community building as the foundation for beginning a school year, and part of that is rested on Our Kids Network and their research on 40 developmental assets. So the idea was that healthy teenagers in particular need to have 7 to 10 caring adults in their lifetime till they get the age of 25, where we believe then that they feel that they can develop resiliency, collaboration, and feel confident and a sense of belonging. So that's been the work for the last 6 weeks. We're excited to be bringing on November the 8th, we're returning back to the Gabriel Barn in Milton. 175 educators have signed up for this session, and what we're going after is the big question: can creativity and innovation skills be taught? Part of that is because the new elementary report card that is coming out is actually having those components on the report card. So we thought that that would be timely in terms of shifting the thinking in terms of that. And the other piece that we're looking at is to reinforce what are the learning conditions for creativity, and why would we go after innovation unless it is to improve a process, product, or an understanding. Following those pieces, what we hope to do is to then put a challenge out, building on the community classroom, to put a challenge out to folks to think about a question that they would like to go after as a group of educators, classroom teachers, or perhaps pooling up with a variety of schools on what they could go after with their students to demonstrate the messiness of creativity and innovation with the curriculum that school programs has put out so thoughtfully. So those are the pieces that we're working on November the 8th, and hopefully it will be a good time. We have a band starting off to get people in the groove, and we hope between 5 and 8 o'clock that night they'll be energized and wanting to play.
That sounds like fun. Anything else?
Yep. Yeah, as all trustees are aware, and most of the community is aware, the Ministry of Education appointed the independent administrator reviewer, Margaret Wilson, a very respected educator, has I better be careful how I say this. I was going to say been around many years. I don't mean it that way, but has done many high-level educational inquiries, projects, and has made a difference in this province around a number of things. The latest that I recall that she was involved in was an inquiry into the Toronto District School Board around climate of the board and environment and so on. So Margaret will commence her work very shortly, I assume, and we will go through the independent review process. As I've said in the newspapers and everywhere else, we welcome this. I think it's a good move to have someone independent take a look at our process. And I want to emphasize her role will be to look at the process, not the decision. And we'll comment on that. Thanks. Unless there's any questions, I'll...
There is a question or comment. Trustee Gerbens.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, to Director Miller. I have had questions with regards to when would be an expected report to be made public.
Through you, Chair Amos, I don't know. They tend to try to do these very quickly, not urgently, but quickly enough because they realize the community and the board all want to get moving. So But I cannot say at this point when the report will be done. It's a ministry initiative, and essentially the ministry, we cooperate and collaborate fully with the ministry, but they're essentially telling us what they need from us, and then we do it. So.
Thank you.
And one more thing.
Oh, you thought of something else. Okay.
This is real quick. Last night I popped into a retirement on the way home, and it was fascinating because this gentleman retired. He started working for this board in Canada's centennial year. He has worked 50 years for the board. Al Barrow was 33 years a teacher and 17 years I'm not sure if he was president of ETFO OT for 17 years, but he was certainly president for a number of those years. And so for 50 years, he's been working with the Halton District School Board. And I popped into his retirement last night, and he was his jocular self and energetic. It was entertaining, actually. Took a couple of pot shots at me and Deborah, so it was good. But I couldn't believe it when I thought he started working in Canada's centennial year for this board. So well done, Al Barrow.
Kudos to him, for sure. All right, so we're now up to communications from the chair. I don't have a lot other than to share the fact that the 10th annual Parent Involvement Committee Conference was last Saturday, and we all were treated with the keynote speaker, Candy, and I know she had many of us in tears and with her message, and it was very heartfelt, and she made a big impact on almost everyone in the room. And many of the parents throughout the day who were attending the sessions were saying how great they were, and some of them wish they'd known about it before, and others say they're there every year. So even though we advertise and advertise and advertise, I'm still not sure how we can reach everybody, but we try. And earlier this week, we had a joint transportation meeting with our coterminous board, the Halton Catholic District School Board, and we were able to try and give some guidance around a transportation study. And I believe that's all I have at the moment. So we're now up to committee reports. Do we have any committee reports tonight? Trustee Gray.
Thank you very much. And through the chair, I just wanted to add a little bit more to the PIC conference in that I really feel that we have to acknowledge the work of the PIC committee members and also led by Joanne Basta. But in particular, I want to give a high props to the student volunteers from Craig Kielberger who worked both the Friday night and all day Saturday. I've never seen such a hardworking, dedicated group of students. I was so very, very impressed, and they made the work of the committee for PIC just that much more enjoyable and easy to accomplish everything that needed to be done. I have two other quick things. This is Government Week. I had a chance to make a presentation.
Is this a committee report, or is that a trustee question and comment?
That could be a question and comment. Okay. Could I speak about the HLF?
Yes, that's the committee.
Thank you. I'll add that comment in later. Thank you for that reminder. Under the HLF, just wanted to remind everybody that November 2nd, the benefit bash is coming up. And just as a reminder to those who may be watching out there, you can purchase your tickets on the HLF site. The HLF is a group that eliminates barriers for our students, provides scholarships, and also engagement funds. Engagement funds are supporting the equipment and special resources that are needed by schools. And so it's a very, very worthwhile event, and it is the major and most important fundraising event of the HLF. So if you can support that on November the 2nd by attending the benefit bash, please do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trustee Gray. Trustee Gerbentz.
Thank you, Chair Amos. So the fundraising subcommittee met last week, and we are moving forward in a wonderful way. We should have a policy coming back to the committee of the whole in not next meeting, but the meeting after, though we do have some things we need to, some legal questions that we have to deal with. And the subcommittee for municipal transit has met, and we have done a lot of fact-finding. We're still fact-finding, though, and it's been very interesting, and I'll share more of that information at Committee of the Whole.
Thank you. Vice Chair Graves.
Which will be occurring next week. I'll just build on Trustee Gravence's. So in addition to the Transportation Partnership, we also have EDC bylaw coming. And just a reminder to the public and our community partners as well, that we do have the Community Planning and Partnership meeting coming up at the following Committee of the Whole on November 8th.
Thank you. Trustee Collard.
The bylaw subcommittee continues to get through the work. We have almost finished our first run through the entire bylaws. We have only a couple left to go, and the date for the next committee meeting hasn't been finalized yet. I did send out a doodle to the committee members, and I'm just waiting for a couple of responses, and then I will let everyone know.
Thank you. And seeing no further speakers, we are now up to trustee questions and comments. Trustee Pappen.
Thank you. As you know, this is Local Government Week, and I had the pleasure to attend three of my schools, and I will be attending another one tomorrow. I attended the grade 5 social studies class at John T. Tuck, the grade 11 law class at Lester B. Pearson, the grade 10 civics class at Nelson, and tomorrow I will attend the grade 5 social studies class at Tecumseh. It was a very engaging experience. The grade 5s were very enthusiastic. They asked me if I had ever met Justin Trudeau and if I had met Donald Trump. But I thought it was a great opportunity to get to know our schools and also to give them an idea of what we do as trustees in our role within the greater municipal government we have here in Halton. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Gray.
Yes, thank you through the chair. And I just want to build on Trustee Pappen's comments. I too had a chance to make a presentation this week, but I've also heard from some of the schools that are wanting to have presentations, but not necessarily this week. So I just put it out there to all trustees that the opportunity still exists beyond this week. And in some cases, it involves secondary schools that it fits better into their curriculum a little bit later. So it's a worthwhile experience, and I too enjoyed myself with the presentation that I made to the group of students that I saw yesterday.
Thank you. Trustee Gerbentz.
So I'm sure you're all aware of the Me Too campaign online, and I was shocked but not surprised to see in my own Facebook feed 49, they happen to be women, but 49 women wrote Me Too on their status. And I think that it is a symptom of a huge problem in society. And it breaks my heart.
Does this tie into school?
Yes,
okay.
It does. So I was wondering where students, or are students clear as to what is considered sexual harassment and sexual assault? What do we have in place to help ensure that it doesn't happen to our students? And what are the supports that are available for students who are victims of sexual harassment and sexual assault?
Thank you, Superintendent Podgerberg.
Thank you for the question, and through trustees through the chair to Trustee Grabentz. That's covered in part of the Bravo. There's also aspects of it in the phys ed and health curriculum across the grades, certainly more in the older grades as you work up, so it would be covered there. In terms of specific targeted interventions, our social workers in all of our high schools have a social worker. They would initially connect with the student, but then make a community referral. Specific agencies would support any of our students with that. So I would like to think we're well positioned to deal with that, but as in the cases you're noting, sometimes it's the awareness of it and what's emerging. So that would definitely be work that would fall to our social workers. And I mean, all of our teachers in a non-clinical sense can take on supportive veins as well. But what we coach them to do is put it in the hands of a professional.
Follow up? Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. I know you mentioned that sometimes it's in the upper grades, and those courses are not required. And I was just wondering, is there a place that is required that students really are taught these things?
Through the chair to Trustee Grabench, this was my life when the new health and phys ed curriculum came out. There are explicit pieces around these concerns within the healthy relationship strand. One of the things that was a concern for parents was the use of language including naming genitalia in grade 1. And the rationale for that is around kids being able to explain adequately in case of injury, in case of touching things so that starts at a very young age. There are many resources that are shared with parents from schools around specifically this and age-appropriate tools to help them at home. And they're available in multiple languages. So the ministry had provided a great deal of support. Superintendent Salmini is not here today, but that continues to be some of the focus going home in terms of communicating. Every year, there's a letter that goes to every grade and says, these are the pieces that are being covered and how to support at home. So it is very explicit now.
Director Miller.
Yeah, and I would just add, if you'll recall, when that curriculum was being implemented, there was a great deal of, shall we say, angst and opposition around the province. And the Premier of this province and senior cabinet ministers made it very clear and were very explicit that a big part of this is about keeping children safe and helping kids understand and on identifying and how to deal with it when these kinds of things happen. So,
thank you. Trustee L. Harrison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My comments tonight are both around inclusion, and I wanted to firstly give a shout out to Eastview Public School. On their Meet the Teacher night, they did something that I thought was pretty cool. They invited all of the families to stop by and help translate the school motto into different languages. The school motto is work hard, be on time, and be kind. And I don't know if anybody can hazard a guess to how many languages that was translated into. Oh dear. 41. Okay, 15. The answer is 15. And I just thought that was a very welcoming activity to really promote inclusion. So I wanted to congratulate them on that and share that practice or that best practice with you. Secondly, this is something that I have been itching to say since September, and I wish I would have said it sooner, but I didn't, so I'm going to now. Back in September, Agnes Wenjack passed away, and that is the mother of Cheney Wenjack, the 12-year-old who passed away after fleeing the Indian residential school in northwestern Ontario. You'll know that Cheney's life was commemorated through poems in The Secret Path by Gord Downie. And you'll also know that Gord Downie passed yesterday. So when I was thinking about his song, the hip song Bob Cajun, I saw the constellations reveal themselves one star at a time. And for me, 1 star is the Truth and Reconciliation work. And Prime Minister Trudeau said today, Canada is less without Gord Downie. And I was thinking, how can we be more and build on the work that he and others have done around truth and reconciliation? So one of my experiences in leading events is often to deliver the traditional acknowledgement of traditional lands. And I have to say that pronouncing some of the names I find extremely challenging. And name and identity are something that was taken away from Cheney Wenjack and thousands of others. So my request is that we invite our new knowledge guide to come to the board and read our our acknowledgement of traditional lands so that we may have it on tape for myself and others to benefit from, so I can honor that identity, honor the work of Gord Downie and many, many others in this area to help to give voice to that past. Thanks.
And The Secret Path is one of the books that is being read by the system this year for HDSB Reads. Trustee Reynolds.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I can certainly take that back. Tammy Hardwick is our Indigenous lead for the board, and so she's always our primary contact. We're obviously extremely encouraged with being able to bring Steve Paquette on board as our knowledge guide, but he works in support of the work that Tammy leads. So I certainly will bring this notion back to them. I believe a piece that I may get back in response is that yes, they would absolutely like to have the identities recognized in the way that they are named and pronounced correctly. At the same time, what they would not want is that to be used in place of others taking this on and giving voice and spreading voice. And an example would be at the PIC conference where Tammy was asked, and she was there, to read the land acknowledgement, and she made a point of saying no, that those who are coordinating the conference, should take ownership of that because it has greater meaning for them to be saying it in that particular instance. So I thought that was a bit of a revelation, but I certainly take the advice in terms of us all learning the appropriate ways to say the names of the peoples who lived on these territories.
Thank you. Trustee Reynolds.
Thank you. Before the Thanksgiving break, I had the honor to attend a memorial event at Burlington Central High School. A group of over 100 alumni, as well as current and past staff, including 5 past central principals, were in attendance to witness the auditorium dedication to Halton District School Board teacher Helen Zerdillik, who sadly passed away earlier this year. At the theater naming ceremony, a former student, Scott Sutherland, came forward to generously donate $25,000 to be distributed as a graduation bursary to students to honor Helen's legacy. That's not all. Burlington Foundation has created a Helen Zerdillik Memorial Fund for the Performing Arts, which will present each November at the Rotary Burlington Music Festival a bursary, and donations can be made online to the Burlington Foundation directly. Oh, that's not all. Sorry.
Sorry.
Also good news about auditoriums. Aldershot School Community has ignited their efforts to their auditorium renewal, having paused their efforts during the PAR process. They are now, want you to know, they're up and running, and to date they are halfway to their goal of $125,000.
Thank you. Superintendent Miller.
Director Miller. I would just like to comment on Helen Zadrulik. She was a champion of theater in this board, and any teacher and any student that took drama in any school for about 25 years knew of Helen Zadrulik. She also went on to teach at Sheridan College, and her name was very well known, just not in Halton, but around the entire province, and taught many, many students who went on to careers in theater and acting and television production and all sorts of things. So sadly, she passed away last spring. But
thank you. Trustee Collard.
Thank you. Through you to the director and possibly Superintendent Cullen. There was an article published, I think 2 weeks ago, perhaps a little bit more recently than that, about the new administration building. And I was wondering if I could get some more information about how far along we are on this process and where the funding for that building comes from, because there seem to be some concerns that the funding perhaps comes from areas that the students might benefit from. And if there will be any community type of consultation, and just what the steps are going forward, and when we anticipate seeing the next report on this.
Through you, Chair Amos, to Trustee Collard, I will start, and then I'm going to pass it over to Superintendent Cullen and Superintendent Bierman. I read the article as well, and there are inaccuracies in it. We are prohibited from taking money that would be for student use, prohibited from using proceeds of disposition, all those things to use for an admin center. We can't use any of those funds to build an education admin center. So I would say that off the top, and I will then turn it over to Superintendent Cullen, or maybe Superintendent Bierman first to talk a little bit about those rules, and then Superintendent Cullen to talk about the other parts of your question, where we are with the admin center. It's okay?
Through the chair, Director Miller has accurately conveyed the information with respect to the use of funds. The board, through the Education Act, cannot use funds that are from the sale of schools or any proceeds disposition for an administrative building. That is something that, again, we are not allowed to do. And any funding for admin buildings would have to come from the sale of prior administrative buildings or anything that is non-school related.
And through the chair to trustees, the status of that, you will recall we have been working on the original outline scope plan in broad brush strokes around need. Some of the comments in the article, again, were inaccurate around the need for a new building, both in terms of the population of the staff currently and into the future, and that again was all outlined in the staff report, not in the article that's been referred to. As far as status goes, trustees know we are still working and focusing on the location aspects of that report, and we would have an update when anything changes in that particular regard. So I would hope to do so as soon as we have an update on that.
May I follow up, please?
Thank you. Go ahead.
Is it perhaps prudent to communicate this to the community, that how such a building would be funded, and perhaps engage the community a little bit on this?
Through you, Chair Amos, to Trustee Collard, we discussed that and we suggested that it's probably not prudent at this point, because I think it stays out there for a longer period of time, and I think we end up in debates about it, and so.
Thank you. Trustee Harvey Hope.
I'm going to continue on that vein. One of the issues that I had an issue with when I came to this board was the difference between standard private business accounting and public sector accounting. And one of the things that takes a little getting used to is up until recently, the government would grant money for assets and say, here's some money, build a school. And then here's some money, buy some stuff. But they don't have a system until recently of depreciation, as in, save some of your money that you generate, put it aside, and then replace an asset. They don't have that kind of a system. They don't have that kind of a system in an admin center. So the problem is that we have a certain amount of money to do administration, and as the buildings get older, or we need an elevator for people to get to the second floor, or to renovate, or to incorporate the new technology, the funding isn't necessarily there. It's enveloped. The envelope has to cover all of the things we do, all the PARs, all the administrative things. That is the envelope for the Board admin. The student funding is separate, and the Board admin funding is that. And because of spec ed funding and how it's not funded, we've been dipping into Board admin to pay to keep up the levels of spec ed funding. So, it really bothers me when I hear people thinking that we're taking from student funds to try and get an admin center. So we aren't, but we still recognize that our staff require accessible buildings, places that actually have air conditioning that work in the summer because they're actually working 12 months a year, that they actually have technology and wires and things that they need just to do their jobs. So I agree that we don't need to keep it in the realm very much, but it's something that's not going to go away. And until the funding model actually says, these buildings last 30, 40, 50 years, and you're going to have to replace them and have some way, the old system was sinking fund, but some way to put funds aside and say, yes, at some point. But right now, there is no method to get a new building other than us, using one less envelope or trying to find some way that we scrimp and save in the admin envelope. And so
I would just emphasize using one less envelope that is not intended for student use. We cannot use money that is intended for students for an admin center.
Thank you. Trustee Collard.
Yes, I was just hoping to get an update on the Frontenac play structure from Superintendent Cullen.
Through the chair to Trustee Collard. For trustees that may not know the background on this one, we had a situation where a contractor had been retained to construct a facility in one of the play areas. The specifications on it were generally vague, but I think well-intentioned on behalf of those that had done it. Parents at the school that had raised some of the funds for the project were concerned about it, and we've had a number of calls about it. So staff actually were out there today. I received a report from them along with some photographs and their recommendations, and following a review of their findings and suggestions, I hope to meet with the principal and then subsequently determined who has the voice at the school, particularly on the parent side, to address the issue. So we'll be following up with that directly with the school from what I can tell from here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And seeing no further speakers, can I have a motion to rise into private? Trustee Gray, seconded by Trustee Reynolds. All those in favor?
They can go.
That passes unanimously. Thank you. We will. All right.
The outside guys can go because we're only going to be a couple of
I,
minutes.
I think we can just do this and get it finished up.
Stay, we'll only be 5 minutes.
It's just the.
It's just if you let them go, then we have to wait.
Oh.
There's just in the director's report, I have 2 quick items.
Okay, so where are we on the agenda? Oh, Kevin has to leave. In just a minute, I have to stop this.